afternoon, everybody, or good evening, depending on where you are. This is Alan, Macro Talk 2 today. And yeah, it's going to be a handful, I think. We're talking about tilt and shift and swing, Kenlock. We don't like Kenlock. And Scheimflug. Yeah, there'll be a spelling test at the end of this. Anyway, it's February the 20th. 1925, or later than that, 2025. And yeah, we have a live stream that is not for the faint of heart. This is fairly advanced and confusing stuff that probably will be of little use to anybody, but is going to be fun nonetheless. We have two goals today. Firstly, to provide you with some basic information about perspective change, the field of focus, plane of focus, POF, plane of focus, perspective change, using a piece of equipment that ought to be outlawed. Really, it ought to be, because that's the second thing I want to talk about, is getting you up to speed on the dangers of using this Kenlock Bellows. Yeah, you'll understand when we get there. It has the misleading and innocuous name of Kenlock Bellows, but I call it something else. Saturday, 10 a.m. After Stack, I'm going to lead the discussion on Photoshop's version of focus stacking. And it's a useful skill to have, useful to know how it works. You won't use it much, but that's what we're going to talk about. And we're running low on February. I understand that we have no more after next week, so that means if you have not submitted a photograph for the February competition, you soon won't be able to. And this one is on macro symmetry, so figure that one out and enter your picture or pictures. Still looking for thoughts on live stream topics, still looking for ideas for competition themes, if there's anything in particular you want to do. And I'm also looking for volunteers who want to be guest judges. To be a guest judge, you have to have entered at least enough of the competitions for me to know who you are. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, if you want to do it, you can do it. We'll do it together. We'll make a video. Okay, that was that. And my sincere thanks. This is the only nice thing I'm going to say today, I think. But my sincere thanks to Paul Daly for kindly lending me this pristine set of Kenlock Gallows, the most complicated, confusing piece of equipment you're ever likely to run into, but very generous of you to lend it to me. I am going to be so happy to get it back to you today. I'm going to send it out today as soon as we get through with this. And sincere thanks also to Rick Littlefield, who previewed some of today's content and laughed only a few times. So I take that as a vote of confidence. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about things like tilt-shift lenses. You may be familiar with them or have heard of them. You may have one. You may even use one. And in order to understand what we're talking about in terms of the Kenlock Bellows, I need for you to understand a little bit about tilt-shift lenses. Even though this isn't a tilt-shift lens, it's worse than that. So we'll start there. A tilt-shift lens is, this is an approximation of one right here. It's not actually, it's just a 50mm, I think it's an E series lens. It is, yep, it's a Nikon 50mm little thing. Very nice, very sharp. And it's on a tilt-shift adapter. This one is made by Keepon. It's Japanese, very expensive, very nice. What this does is it allows the lens to be moved either side to side. Well, you can't see that, can you? It's sliding side to side like that. Or it would be up and down if you were using it portrait style. Also, you can rotate the whole thing. Watch me rotate the whole thing like that, you see. You can change the angle of attack, and you can also, this is the fun part, if I can find the right button, you can also bend the Let me put it back up and down there. You can also tilt the lens. See that? That does not look normal to you, right? It's tilted down. Now it's tilted up. If you're wondering why I'm not using a better camera than this one on here, it's because I have a fantastic setup here, and my iPhone just suddenly stopped being recognized by the computer. But anyway, so this is a tilt shift lens. What do we use it for? What's the purpose of it? Well, to understand that, we need to understand these two concepts of tilt and shift. Tilt is when we change the angle of the lens like that. That's the tilt. Now it can go down or it can go up, but it's when the plane of the lens is rotated in respect to the sensor of the camera, which of course doesn't move, it stays there. So what we've done is, let me move my hand to the other side, we're tilting the lens up or down in respect to the sensor, which stays flat. Right. Why would you do that? Well, if you do that, thanks to a very weird principle called the Scheimpflug principle, which actually was talked about by a guy named Scheimpflug, who was a corporal in the Austrian army or something, and that people think he invented it. He didn't. He just talked about it. So maybe one day people will think I invented something. But yeah, he just talked about it, but his name stuck. It is such a catchy name after all. But the idea is this, the Scheimpflug principle, and I'm not going to do drawings and diagrams. I did, but they're more confusing than just showing you. If you imagine the sensor in your camera is a plane, like so, right, up and down, and the lens is normally the same. It has a plane. You can imagine it's just, you know, a plane in front of the lens. It's right through the middle of of an imaginary single lens. It's up and down too. They're parallel. And that means that your subject out here in the world is going to have a focal plane that is parallel to these two. They're all parallel. Now, if you tip this lens like that, and you change the angle of the lens, you haven't changed the angle of the sensor, so the sensor's still, I'll put that down, the sensor's up and down, but now you've changed the angle of the lens. Well, if you were to continue those lines down until they cross in some imaginary point, then that would also coincide with where the new plane of focus would be. And if you think about it, if your subject is a little bit further away, that would mean the subject could be, the plane of focus could be very flat indeed. Normally it would be up like this, but now it's down like this. Actually tipped in the other direction, but you get what I'm talking about. And those three lines would coincide through this imaginary point. That's what Scheimpflug was talking about. He must not have had anything else to talk about, is all I can say. But that is the principle that guides everything we're going to be talking about today. So with that, it means that if you have a tilt-shift lens, you can tilt the lens to change the plane of focus. Let's say, for example, that you were trying to photograph something that was tilted at 45 degrees, like the something I'm going to be showing you in a minute, because we are going to do a demonstration of this. If you just use your camera the way it is and you point it at the subject, you're going to have a very sharply demarcated plane of focus. And if you're using a macro lens, it'll be very shallow. It'll be very thin. So you'll have a little bit that's in focus and everything else out of focus. But if you could somehow change the angle of the lens just a little bit, then that could change that plane of focus to where it actually coincides with your subject, which is flat. It doesn't have to be flat. It can be undulating, or it can have nubbins on it. As long as the plane coincides with the plane of your subject, the whole thing will be in focus. Now think how useful that would be in some kinds of close-up photography, particularly product photography, photographing things like watches or coins. It means that you could photograph them at an angle and still have the whole thing in focus. So why is that not the greatest invention in the world? Well, it's because we already have focus stacking, and that's usually what we do to accomplish the very same thing. Now, sometimes you just don't want to focus stack. You want to get everything in one shot. And that's where this comes in handy. So that's what the tilt in tilt shift is. So what is the shift? Good question. Good question. The shift is this. Once you have tilted a lens, and in doing so, you've changed the plane of focus so that everything's in focus. By the time you do that, if you just think about it for a second, your camera is, your sensor is going to be in the wrong place. All of a sudden, your sensor has moved in relation to the subject because of the lens changing its angle. This whole concept of shift came into being, and that is where the whole lens moves up and down in parallel to the sensor. So now you want to see me do that, I'm sure, but I can't do it because this adapter is made for architects, so Rick tells me, and that it doesn't actually have the tilt and the shift in the same orientation. I still don't understand why, but the point is this: the lens shifts down and up in relation to the sensor, parallel to the sensor. That means you can reframe the subject after you've tilted to get everything in focus. You can then move the sensor in relation to the subject, so that everything is now situated within your frame. Now, that's not the main reason that the shift feature exists on lenses. There are a lot of lenses, like this lovely one from Laowa, which actually has a shift function but no tilt. Why would you need that? Well, it's because what happens when you shift the lens is you change the perspective of the shot. That's what perspective control means. When you see lenses that are marked as PC, perspective control lenses, that is because the lens moves parallel to the sensor in relation to the sensor. There we go. Hang on. So you can see the mount there of the lens, and it slides up and down. And what that does is moves the lens up and down in relation to the sensor. Why would you need to do that? Well, if your perspective is off, regardless of whether or not you've used a tilt function for this photograph. Let's say you're photographing a building, right? As long as your sensor is parallel to the building and you are at the midpoint of the building, the whole thing will be square and everything will look normal. But if you're down on the ground and you're pointing the camera up, then no longer are all the parts of the building the same distance from the sensor. The parts at the top are further away. And as a result, you get this perspective where the building appears to be, the lines of the edge of the building are coming together. That is why what you want to do is shift the frame upwards so that you can get the whole building in normal perspective. You can correct the perspective, and that's what this is for too. When you take very, very close-up macro photographs, and this is a macro lens, when you take extremely close images, it causes a lot of different kinds of distortion, but there's a lot of perspective distortion. And simply by moving the lens without moving the camera, you can correct most of that, so things don't look weirdly stretched or oddly contorted. You can return them to their normal outline simply by moving the lens a tiny little bit. So that is very similar to the tilt, in that it takes relatively little tilt to make a fairly spectacular difference in the appearance of the photograph. So how does any of this relate to this monstrosity here? This thing. This is well, I'll show you. I really want to show you one from the side, but I can't because of the problem I had with the phone. I'll tip it a little bit so you can see it. The camera I have is on the ceiling. So this thing that is this bellows, there's a lens on the front, that's a normal lens, and there's a camera back here, normal camera. Everything in between is instrument of the devil. This thing is called a Kenlock tilt shift swing bellows, and it was sent to me by Paul, as I said, and he wanted me to take a look at it and tell him what I thought about it. Well, I'm getting ready to do that. It's a very complicated piece of machinery. If you have ever seen one of those really old-timey cameras, a view camera, the kind where you have to put your head under the covers to use it, that camera has a plane on the back, which is where the sensor is. It's ground glass in there, but that's where you view the image, and that is movable. You can move it side to side like that. You can tilt it, you can raise it up and down. There's another plane that holds the lens. It's called the lens board, and it's in front of that, and it has a lens in it, and you can move that as well, up and down, side to side, tilt, rotate, all of these things, every degree of freedom you can think of. And in between the two is a bellows. Well, that is a view camera, and it gives you an enormous amount of control over things like perspective, because of what you can do with the sensor plane, but also with the plane of focus, which you can manage with that lens plane. That is exactly what this thing is. That's exactly what this Kenlock Bellows is. It is like a tilt shift lens attached to a tilt shift camera. Confusing, right? Let's take a look at this thing and see what the various components of it are. I'll say one thing first, though, before we get over there. This piece of equipment, if you're thinking of buying one, don't buy one. You'll spend maybe $700 or $800 on one of these things. That's what I've seen them for on eBay. But they're not particularly well made, and they're not very sturdy, and they will drive you mad, absolutely mad as a hatter. If you've never used a view camera or anything like that, they will drive you bonkers. Modern cameras don't fit on them, not without adding about 50 different adapters right here. All kinds of, every single piece of adapter material that I had to attach one to another, to another, to another, to get enough room to put a camera on it without bumping into the screws and nubbins. Then you've got this bellows, and the bellows is just like any other bellows. There was a question that I was asked earlier on today. When do I use tubes? When do I use bellows? What are my criteria? Pretty straightforward. The time that I will use tubes is when I know exactly what the equipment setup is going to be. I'm using a tube lens and a microscope objective. It's always going to be at the same distances, and whether it's horizontal or vertical, I'll usually use tubes for that because it takes up less room, it's less cumbersome to set up, and I already have bunches of tubes already set up with tube lenses. So I would use them when I was basically using an infinity corrected microscope setup. I would use tubes. When would I use the bellows? Is whenever I'm using a lens that I want to have flexibility, versatility in my magnification. And that is classically this case when I'm using a reversed enlarger lens, and by varying the length of the bellows, I can go from around 1.8 to 1 up to 3.5 to 1. Gives me a vast range of magnification. That's typically when I will use it. When would I use a Kenlock tilt shift swing bellows? Absolutely never. Ever. That wasn't your question. So that's when I'd use a regular bellows, a PB6. Somebody said there was a good recent model of the PB6 on sale somewhere for $110. Buy it. I bought my first two sets of PB6 bellows for I think $100 each, and it was the best money I ever spent. They're both still in perfect working order. So yeah, that's when I use the bellows. This bellows on this device functions much the same as any other bellows, except it's hard to do simple things like extend the bellows and change your magnification. The reason is there are so many buttons, screws, and knobs on this thing that when you're tightening one or loosening one in order to, what you think you're going to do is move the bellows backwards and forwards, you end up causing all manner of twisting and shifting and tilting. You see, what these things can do is they can rotate side to side, but both the forward and the rear standard can twist like this. They can go down and up. This would be a classic tilt. They can shift. See, I don't even know which things to unscrew. They can shift up like that, closer to the camera. They can shift down. So, and that's not all. There's more. Well, of course, they can move towards and away from one another, which is what you would expect from any bellows. But everything else is bizarre, and everything that I just showed you on the front standard also happens on the back. And I'm not going to do it because it took me forever to get this straight, but they'll go side to side. It'll slide up, slide down. You can even, I didn't even show you this, you can slide one to the left, leaving the other one. Who knows what button that was, though? Probably this one in the front. Hang on, bear with me. Oh. Some of the buttons are super tight. You're going to have to take my word for it. This part here will slide left and right as well. This whole thing will. See how wobbly it is? Yeah, bit distressing. So what you really have is two tilt shift apparati on either end of a bellows. And that is so confusing when you start using it. But we're going to start using it now, just to show you that I did take the time and go to the effort to learn how to use one of these things so that I could show you. The idea is we're only going to need the first set of thingamajigs here, the first set of adjustments, though we could use both, and I'll talk you through how we would use them and why we would use them. So out here in front, it's a little bright. Maybe you can see that better now. There is a glass slide on a mount that has a little computer chip on it. I was doing this initially with a coin, but the coin was too big to really show you anything, because in order to demonstrate this, I had to have a little bit of separation, which caused, of course, more magnification. Let's go ahead then. Look at the inset picture there. That's right through the camera. What I'm going to do is move the whole bellows. No, I'm not doing that, am I? I was moving just one of them. Moving the whole bellows forwards and backwards through the chip. Now you can see that at any given distance, only part of the chip is in focus. Now it's the front of the focus, the front of the chip there, up through the middle to the back. Now the back's in focus. Let's say you wanted to have this whole thing in focus. Well, you can't do it with just a regular bellows. You can't do it unless you were to somehow manipulate the subject so that it was parallel to the sensor, manipulate the camera until it was parallel to the subject, or use this device. Now what you can do here, by tilting this lens until it is parallel, well, correction, no, it shouldn't be parallel. You'd use the Scheimpflug the concept that we talked about earlier, so that it's going to be somewhere in between the plane of the sensor and the plane of the subject. We'll figure that out in just a minute. But see what happens when we do that, when we tilt the lens down until until the plane of focus is parallel to the subject. We can't see the subject anymore. Why not? Because we just pointed the lens somewhere else. So what we do is we use the shift function. Sorry, the shift function to shift the image back up to correct the framing of the image. So we use the tilt, and then you just kind of fine tune it. We'll do a bit more tilt, and then we'll try a bit less. It's very sensitive, and there is only going to be one combination that's going to get you the whole thing in focus. It's not there. It's got to be further down, and the whole thing in the frame. So let's keep going. You'll begin to see in a minute why I was getting so upset with this thing. Well, that's not quite it, but it's better. Now, what would you use the rear standard for? Well, you can actually fine-tune everything. You can fine-tune both the focus and the perspective problems by also moving the camera slightly. It gives you more control over the end result. Now we're going to pause for a second so that I can show you that none of this stuff is made to actually hold a camera. It will not stay in position. It just once you loosen it, the whole thing gets wobbly as all get out. So let me try to tighten that so it doesn't move as much. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the camera back down. Maybe not. All right. Well, let's try something else to get a little bit better look here. The concept I'm sure you're seeing is real, that with just a little bit of movement of the various components, you can get the focus, even though I haven't yet. It's getting there. The problem is I don't have quite enough tilt on this just yet. So probably the easiest thing to remember while I mess around with this, we're getting close now. The easiest thing to remember is that the tilt is used to change the plane of focus. The shift is used either to change the perspective of the photograph to make things line up more normally, or to reframe a tilted shot like this is supposed to do. It's getting there. It's almost there. It's a little difficult to do because the camera's slowly sagging back down to the ground here on the back. But you get the idea. Now, there is a bit of a problem here. That the idea with the tilt, by the way, is so that you can get everything in focus without having to use an insanely high aperture or insanely high f number. I'm using 2.8. I could... No, I'm not. I'm using 8. That must have switched. But remember that the effective aperture is a lot more than what is set on the lens. It's actually the effective aperture is going to be the magnification that you're getting +1 multiplied by that. So by the time we're at 2 to 1 and f8, that could be an f number of f24, an effective aperture of f24, which is too high. It's one of the reasons you'll get softening. So allowing you to tip the plane of focus will allow you to get more of the subject in focus without having to risk using a very high F number. In this case, I've got it at 8. We'll drop it back to 5, 6, and that will make my subject a little bit more out of focus. But let me try moving everything in a bit. It is possible that at this degree of magnification, that we aren't going to be able to get the thing completely in focus, even with the tilt. Yeah, I had it completely in focus earlier, though, so take my word for it. You're never going to use one of these, I hope, anyway, so it shouldn't matter. But that's the idea. What then is going on with all of this turning ability? Well, this is no different than tilt up and down, tilt side to side. That's what the swing is that they refer to. That's great if you're trying to shoot something that's it's got better focus on the one side than the other, and you can just change the plane of focus not only in the one orientation but in the other, so that you can get the whole thing in focus across as well as up and down. See what I'm saying? It would be easier if you could see my hand motions, which were going like this as I was saying that. By tilting up and down, you can follow the plane of focus of something that's leaning down. But if it's also leaning off to the right, by shifting the lens in that direction, you can move the plane of focus in more than just one the orientation. You see what I'm saying? And you would probably need to use the ability to shift the lens, not just up and down, but also side to side, to reframe the image. Now, don't you think that focus stacking suddenly sounds a lot easier than it used to? Absolutely. No doubt about it. Focus stacking is a piece of cake. Doesn't use any words like Scheimpflug anywhere in it. You don't need to know any mathematics. Though, hats off to one of the modern day pioneers of this kind of photography. The person who I probably learned more about this from by watching his videos and reading his writing on it is my friend Vincent Laforet, who's an Apple person and a wonderful, wonderful photographer. He's done a lot of work with tilt shift stuff. A lot of portrait photographers will use the tilt to get unusual angles of focal plane through faces, so that they can have sharply focused eyes and then the rest of the head all soft and weird looking. So that's another thing you can do. You've probably seen this used to effect in landscape photography, especially when you're taking photography from up above and you've got a nice view down on the world. You can use this same principle to shift the plane of focus. Actually, you usually do this by, instead of shifting it down like we are, you shift it up. Then those lines that I was talking about earlier, they meet above the camera. The result is that you get this area of focus that's out of focus behind and in front. And it makes everything that's in sharp focus look kind of like it's a toy. It's a very strange but very satisfying kind of photograph to take. I love them. I've only done it a couple of times, but it's a lot of fun. I've only done it a couple of times because where I lived was completely flat. I couldn't get up above anything to make anything look like a toy. You got to think about that. Don't go buy an expensive tilt shift lens if you live in, say, Kansas. They don't have any hills there. All right, so thanks very much to Vincent for sharing all of that cool knowledge. So what do you guys think? Is this something you're going to rush out and spend $850 on one of these Kenlock Bellows devices? If you are, get in touch with me first. I have some stuff I'd like to sell you before you spend all that money. But so that's it. Most people who use tilt shift lenses, especially the ones that are called perspective control lenses, they are basically shift lenses, though they may have some tilt functionality. They're used a lot at slightly longer focal lengths for architectural photography. You've probably seen them used a lot for that. Great for kind of squaring up the buildings so they don't look like they're falling over. That's commonly what it's used for. In landscape, it can be used by changing the angle of focus to get your entire landscape in focus, which is pretty spectacular. And it's used a lot by professional product photographers, especially photographing things like watches or flat lay assemblages, where you want to get everything in focus, but you want to get it all in one shot. Usually they're using much smaller, much shorter lenses, much shorter focal length lenses. But actually, I'm trying to think of the name of, I can't remember his name. Really like Taylor. You know a guy named Taylor? Sure you do. He's a photography teacher from the Channel Islands. Carl Taylor, that's it. He has a Hasselblad H6N with lovely Hasselblad lenses and a Hasselblad tilt shift adapter. And he does marvelous work with that. My goodness. And if you ever want to see how this should be done, instead of how I do it, go watch one of his videos, because he does everything we just talked about, changes the plane of focus, shifts the whole lens so that he's got it perfectly framed. You've got to be very careful with light, by the way. Lighting is a little trickier after you do all of this shifting of the lens. You can lose quite a bit of light in the bellows, so you need to be careful that you're lighting your subject well. But shadows can do some odd things when you've got everything tilted like this. So, yeah, it's just a word to the wise. Allow plenty of time to get up to speed on what you need to be doing with the light. That's pretty much it. Trying to think if there's the problems that you can run into, and I've run into these. Well, let's go back for just a second to the lenses that have these kind of shifting or tilting abilities. In order for the lens to work like that, it has to throw a really big image circle, larger than most lenses. Most lenses that we use have an image circle that's just big enough to cover the sensor of the camera that the lens is made for, right? They don't have a vast amount of extra image circle that could be there. Of course, you need that if you're planning to shift the lens up and down, because you need to have image circle to shift the lens onto. Otherwise, you're just going to be capturing black on the sensor. So these lenses tend to cost quite a bit more, because they do have the innards that throw a large image circle. Of course, not a problem in macro, because we're using bellows. We're extending the distance between the lens and the sensor so much that we're casting a fairly large image circle, albeit a dimmer image than if we were right up on the sensor. So that is something to bear in mind. And then, of course, in macro, you need to remember that the more extension you have on your bellows when you start doing your tilting, the less depth of field you're going to have. Now, when you tilt the lens down, the depth of field or the plane of focus is no longer like a sheet of paper that you position through the subject. It's like a wedge of paper, a wedge of something that starts at the camera and spreads out like that. So you have plenty of potential to get everything in focus, but the higher the magnification, the narrower that wedge is. So it can be with a curved subject, and maybe that's my excuse for this, is that it's a little bit curved. Do you want to see if it's come into focus while we've been talking? It hasn't. But it could be that we could fix that fairly easily. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm so sick of this thing that I think I'm gonna quit messing with it. There we go. Almost. See that? It's good enough. So just bear in mind that at magnification, this whole tilting and shifting business gets harder and harder to do, because you're still dealing with a shallower and shallower depth of field. Not to mention the fact that as your magnification increases, your effective aperture is going to increase too. So, well, we did good. I thought this would take a lot longer to get covered. Let me see if there's anything I forgot to mention. I don't think so. Let me see if there's any questions. That would be more fun. There were some questions earlier on, so let me go back and grab those. Baconmeister asked why I didn't post the Pazoom recording. It was an oversight, sir. That's all. It was an oversight, and I'm going to do it as soon as we get through here. Has anybody got any questions about this whole setup thing before I unceremoniously put it back in a box and ship it back to California? Nope, no questions. Well, I'll keep going down the list and see. Let me see. It's still frozen in Maine. Oh, it was Dave Brown that was saying that somebody posted a nice looking PB6 for $110 plus shipping. There you go. That is a good price. You'll pay $200 for a PB6. By the way, the PB4 bellows, the one that 2 models before this, actually has a lot of this same capability that the Kenlock has. It does have a tilt. I don't know if you can shift it, but it has tilt, so you can get those focal plane changes. I've got a PB4 bellows. I don't use it. I should use it. But all right. Let me see. All right. Roy had a question. Following my last rig build. Oh, that was the question about the bellows and tube lenses. Okay, are you good on that? Okay, good. It's really not a hard and fast rule. They don't if you think about it, they are both simply space. They're separation between elements. That's all they are. So they can, it doesn't make any difference quality wise. It's a little easier for me to have something that, if I didn't have the bellows and I was trying to change magnification with this lens I've got on now, which is an EL Nikkor 50mm f2.8N, then I'd have to change my tubes or use helicoids or something to change the length. That would be a pain. That would get old quickly. But the bellows, you can go to town on that. So that's the deal. Harold is here. Greetings, Harold. And Gary, is it -9 degrees in South Carolina today? Nope, it is here. It is here. All right. Susan's here from North Alabama. Greetings, Susan. Great work yesterday. And it's freezing in Germany, says Amit. There you go. Not surprised. And let me see. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Joseph's here. Joseph, have you corrected me on anything yet for today? Please do. I would love to hear your comments on this. I know that you're a large format guy from back in the day, so you probably spent half your life under one of those things, didn't you? Taking pictures back in the teens and 20s. All right, what size LED on the Haier 6, 8, 9, 10, 11 coaxial light LED? Gary, I used the 9mm and regret it because it is awfully small and makes it a hot point light source. I'm beginning to think that folks like who else has used this thing recently besides me and Rick? Rick uses an external flash, just a flash head, and yeah, I've seen other people use an LED light source that's not actually in the beam splitter, and they both look better than mine. I have put some little diffusion discs down in there, and it looks a little better. But yeah, if you want one that's going to fit, you need to get one that's exactly the size of the hole in your beam splitter, and mine was 9. Those specs are written on the beam splitter spec sheet on AliExpress. I thought it looked cool having that light there, but I'm not sure it gives me that much of an advantage. And if the light is too specular, I won't use it. Milder temperatures in the UK, says Nick. Fair enough. It's no milder in Middle Earth, I can tell you that. I am a Gaia music fan, Harold. You know of the man? He is an incredibly talented musician. I found him on Epidemic Sound, which is where I get all of the music for all of my videos and live streams, and I just think his music is fantastic for this purpose. It's nice and upbeat, and some of it's kind of makes you smile, and you can hum to it as well. Yeah, I like it. And the songs are short so that I can get them to the right fit so that they end exactly at the top of the hour. All right. Let me see. I see Joseph's got 2 kilos of excellent high quality Ghirardelli hot chocolate coming from San Francisco. How are you going to distribute that to the rest of us, though, Joseph? Let me see. Lake snow effect. Mike Olson, Arizona. What's it like in Arizona? Warming up, and the insects have started to fly. Yeah, the insects are not flying around here. No, sir. All right, Paul, I'm glad you were here. If I'd known you were here all along, I might have been a little more gentle. I'm going to send this rubbishy finger snapping device back to you. You'll pinch your fingers so many times trying to use this in the various attachment points. I don't know how I managed to get it up and running at all, but yeah, I can't wait to get it back to you, Paul. Do I have your address? If I don't have your address, Paul, please email it to me pronto, because yeah, it's going out today, like I said. All right, let me see. Art's here. Welcome, Art. Glad you made it, and I hope I'm not missing anybody. Thanks as always to Alistair and to Amy and to Bud for doing the bouncer duties. I do appreciate it. And Ingolf Kunz is here from Germany. His part of Germany is also wintry. Spring temperatures are forecasted for the coming weekend. Well, yeah, you could move here to Peoria. They've been forecasting spring temperatures now for 6 weeks. Every week it'll be spring next week, and it's not. It's still horrible, fatally cold weather outside. Can't stand it. All right. Klaus Giloy is down on Virgin Gorda, which is one of probably my favorite little pieces of land on Earth. It's in the British Virgin Islands. It's a tiny little island it's ringed with these big boulders. You don't ask me how they got there, but yeah, it's a lovely place. It's a great diving spot. I used to go down there to dive, and that's where Klaus is. Take some pictures, Klaus. I'm super jealous. All right, let me see. Tilt shift lenses always have the wrong controls, says Joseph. And he thinks Bellows teach you right. Well, they do. They'll teach you just never to bother with tilt or shift. It's such a mess. Why then, by the way, we already talked about this, why the macro lens, this 15mm macro lens, which is, by the way, the shortest focal length shift lens made. Yeah, or it was. It was when they put it out. So, making people and buildings look like toys, of course, says Michelle. Absolutely right. That's one of the things you do with it, for sure. Larry is here. Good to see you, Larry. And that's exactly what you don't want to do. Keep the lens stationary and tilt the camera, says Joseph. Yeah. What? Okay. There you go. I knew you'd know. Borderland Peppers is here. I may have to leave this stream. Fuji made GF versions of great tilt shifts. Now, since I have the GFX system, I should not watch more, which could cost him a ton of money. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Though I looked at the Fujinon tilt shift. Gosh, what was it? It's a fairly long. If I remember rightly, it's a fairly long focal length, but it looks really nice, very well made. I think Susan's got a couple of tilt shift lenses for architecture. Yeah, I've never actually used a real tilt shift lens that has both functions. And I'm still not sure that I completely understand why my adapter does not shift in the same axis that it tilts. Though, you know, I could understand that. If you were using this and using it in this orientation, to photograph a building, and you used the shift to get the building perspective corrected, so that was almost a rhyme, wasn't it? So if you had the uprights parallel, but if you weren't dead square with the building, it might be in focus on one edge and then out of focus a little bit further on. And if you didn't want to close your aperture down at all, if you were already where you wanted to be, then the ability to then ever so slightly tilt the lens in the opposite orientation, yeah, like that, to the side, that would allow you then to get the building in focus all the way down while still correcting the perspective. So maybe I do see the value of that. And then again, maybe I just made all of that up, but that's a thought. I'm definitely going to play around with these adapters a little bit more. It's good fun stuff. Though, when you've spent as much time and effort learning how to focus stack as I have, it does all seem a little bit silly. All right, let's go on here. Harold's here from Norway. God, it's got to be miserable up there. Demetrius is here from Athens. I saw that. Let me see. Klaus is saying between focus stacking and perspective correction in post, I'll be curious to see how Alan makes a case for these lenses. It's not the lenses, it's the bellows, and I am not making a case for them. I'm making a case for steering clear of them. Absolutely. I didn't even mention the fact that one of the best ways that we can control perspective that's out of whack, and indeed the way I've been doing it long before I ever thought about trying a tilt shift lens, was in Photoshop, or in the perspective, and Lightroom, I should say, in the raw editor. You've got perspective control that allows you to do all of this. I mean, you can completely correct wonky looking buildings with just a couple of clicks. In fact, there's an automatic button that will do it for you. So yeah, good point, Klaus, but no, I'm not going for it. Right, so let me see. Harold also agrees that there's a very nice rock formation on the beach at Virgin Gordo. Isn't that great that Harold and I were on the same wavelength on that? And insects, maybe you'll find some. don't know. Has that bellows not sold yet, David? David, somebody said you were trying to get in touch with me last week, and I emailed you, but I didn't hear back. That doesn't mean you didn't email me back. It's just I didn't get it. Did you? Let me know if I should call you or something. All right, let me have a look. Larry's talking about extruders because that's what engineers do when they're bored, I suppose. The baths. What baths? Oh, at Gordo. Understood. Let me see. They're talking about filaments. And David doesn't need a fourth set of bellows. I don't need a fourth set of bellows either. I'm doing good on bellows. And I'm getting ready to have one less bellows in the house this afternoon. Paul got this for $200. So worth the go. Absolutely. No question about it. I would have done the same thing. But now you know. So put it on eBay for $800. A lot of people who shoot larger format, now not full format, not large format, but medium format, use these techniques and use them probably more than we do. Though really, it is better suited to smaller sensors. As the sensor gets bigger, it gets harder and harder to get a big enough image circle to cover the sensor in a satisfactory way. So much so that large format, they hardly use it at all. All right. The bellows Alan is using is made by Hammer, H-A-M-A, and was sold as the Hammer Shift S Spirotone SST. It's a wonder they didn't sell more of them with that catchy name. Yeah. Do you have one, Joseph? Or should I say, do you want one? I have one here. I'll sell it for $800. And then, but Paul will now know that was my ruse. Let me see. Nick says it reminds him of one of the early astronaut initiation steps. Multi-axis trainer. That's exactly what it's like. And you will feel as disoriented and headachy after using it as if you'd been in one of those things. While we've got another 3 minutes left, I'm going to take this camera off. That might not be easy to do. I'm going to try. It is such an incredible pain to get the there we go. I've turned the camera off. So actually, let me see if there's a better picture there. That was the iPhone. That's a bit better. And I'll hide that there. In fact, I can probably make that a little bigger. Just bear with me, chaps. You're getting to see how OBS works. Okay, that's a little bit more zoomed in. There we go. Good. So this is from above with the camera now off. You can see how many adapters I had to use to get it to mount on my D7500, and the battery fell out. Okay, not to worry. So just to give you some idea of how dizzyingly crazy this thing is to manipulate. The back does the tilt and the shift in that orientation. Then it does the shift in this orientation, side to side. It also rotates and moves back and forth, like so. The front does exactly the same. It goes up and down, side to side, rotates. I was going to do a stop motion, like a Wallace and Gromit video, using this and having it squirm across the table or something, and I just got so disgusted with it, I decided not to. But that is the thing. It's a nightmare. Don't buy one. I'm going to pack it up right now. In fact, we can do that live if you want. It's going back in the box. But I'm taking my lens back. And I will give you your adapters, Paul. You're a real sport for sending this to me. This is it then. This is the whole thing. I've got it bolted to this table, so I can't show you the underside. Yeah, it would take a wrench to get it off. But yeah, I've got some pictures of it. That's what I'll do. I'll put them in my next post so you can see the details of it. But yeah, it's awful. Don't get one. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope you have plans for a fun weekend. Maybe go down to the thrift store and see if you can dig through the camera equipment and find yourself a Kenlock Bellows. That would be the source of nightmares, wouldn't it? So yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say. It's exactly 3 o'clock, so I'm going to quit so that I can get to the post office before they close. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Paul, for lending me this this cool device. And you guys have a great weekend. See you next week.